Sup gamers, Red Hook has now officially announced the 12th and final hero to be released May 8th when Darkest Dungeon 2 1.0 releases on Steam. The Flagellant returns, this time as a blight-focused hero. Let's take a look at the wide variety of info released in this PC Gamer piece. It appears that his buffs on Death's Door are returning, which again makes him a high-risk, high-reward hero. This is especially true with the recently nerfed hero DBR, especially against bosses. It also heavily nerfs the Bumper Crop trophy, which is currently my favorite boss trophy, and a common one you'll receive with the Flagellant on your team, since you'll likely want the Fetter to collect blight-based trinkets. We'll have to see exactly how it plays out though. His unique stress form is also back, called Rapturous in Darkest Dungeon 1, in Darkest Dungeon 2 called Toxic. Instead of a standard meltdown, this will cut your HP to the point where you're in range for your low HP abilities and refresh your cooldowns. This is another interesting mechanic to watch, and I'm interested in how the Flagellant plays with the affinity and relationship system, because if he still interacts in the standard ways, that at least makes hoarding stress a bad tactic, at least until the late game. Next, Red Hook has released the names and descriptions for each of his 11 abilities, so we'll speculate a bit on those. Punish is back, which in Darkest Dungeon 1 was a front row to front row single target bleed. In this game, we'll attach a blight. I expect it to be less blight than Noxious Blast, but more direct damage, and probably his most boring move, to be honest. Fester is entirely new. Looks like it removes a single corpse and applies blight to surrounding targets. It gives us another corpse clear option, and may lead to interesting targeting decisions to use the ability to its fullest. Deathless sounds like you sacrifice your own health to heal another. This should also unlock whatever low HP buffs he has, so this may be the most interesting heal to play around with in the game. It'll be interesting to see what the cooldowns and thresholds are on this skill, if any. I'm pretty excited to get another perspective healer, and more consistent than he was in Darkest Dungeon 1 if he can straight up sack his own health without a threshold, unlike the Darkest Dungeon 1 limits. Endure returns from Darkest Dungeon 1, allowing you to stress heal an ally, while I assume you add stress to yourself, as it was in the first game. I'm very interested to see what, if any, thresholds and cooldowns are attached to this move, as this combined with his Toxic Meltdown could make him a solo stress healer, and at the very least make packaging stress heals easier if you happen to bring a real stress healer to the party. Lash's gift is new, but similarly titled to his various camp skills. The blurb says he strikes himself and increases his own health while giving buffs to allies, and this is shown in one of the preview pictures. My guess is this is an HP threshold ability, one of his payoffs for being at a lower HP. It's a very interesting idea, especially the idea that you chain this with a skill like Deathless, which slashes his HP. I love the idea with playing with various HP thresholds. Acid Rain is here. I suspect this is the replacement for Rain of Sorrows, which was a back row AoE bleed in Darkest Dungeon 1. Will be interesting to see exactly what positions he can use these skills in. He'll likely be very playable in the front row, but hopefully he has some back row utility as well, sort of like a reverse Vestal. More is a move from the Vestal's Hero Shrine. It says he heals himself after drawing enemy attacks. Maybe this is a taunt that gives regen on hit. Not a lot to go on from the description, and we have nothing else to really go on as it's not in Darkest Dungeon 1. Suffer returns from Darkest Dungeon 1, allowing you to transfer dots from another hero to the Flagellant. Should combo nicely with Plague Doctor, which I suspect was always going to be the case with the Blight focus. Sepsis is introduced as a giant Blight nuke available at lower health. Will be interesting to see exactly what the payoff is, as this is the first skill we've seen that becomes usable at a lower threshold. Undying is another self-damage ability that will apply regen to an ally. Will be interesting to see how this one scales, as Comfort is pretty underwhelming without the trinket buff. The single target may work out better. And finally we have Necrosis, which sounds like a nuke on all blighted enemies, finally giving some synergetic payoff. This in theory will buff Venom Drop, one of the weaker pads currently, and will further buff Alchemist, which doesn't really need it, but should be pretty fun. Red Hook has also revealed that a new Flagellant-focused miniboss, literally named Death, who will attack the party at random at the end of combats. It's described as able to counter Flagellant's Death Door resist, which sounds absolutely terrifying. Completing the fight will grant you a special item. It'll be interesting to see how often this mini-boss fight happens, and exactly how terrifying it is for your party, and how strong the Flagellant is in order to counter this downside. It'll make stalling a bit more prominent, but also increase strategy in taking fights and finishing fights, as you won't want to end combat in a bad state, lest you get conquered by death itself. Overall, the Flagellant sounds like an incredible addition to this game. A lot of complex mechanics and lots of ways to manipulate his HP pool. It gives us another healer and a quasi-stress healer. Remains to be seen where he can be used. I'm assuming Punish is still a front row ability, but hopefully he can play some back row support. The synergy with Plague Doctor should make Alchemist even stronger, not that it needs it, but should ideally also make Venom Drop playable, which would be very welcome. I expect him to be the hardest to use hero and not very friendly to beginners, similar to the Vestal, though I expect him to be much stronger and much more complex, as it seems that's the route Red Hook has continuously gone as we've progressed through early access. And now a quick channel update. I'm still continuously putting out daily content, currently working through a new profile run that will take us through the end of early access, as well as finishing up the hero skills tier lists and a few last minute guides. The final week of early access will have a couple special videos, including a full review of the early access progress from patch to patch, as well as a direct comparison video between Darkest Dungeon 1 and Darkest Dungeon 2. As much as I hate to make that video, as they're different games with different goals, but for those of you who have yet to commit to the game, I want you to have all the information possible in making a decision on the purchase. Moving forward into 1.0, I've taken the month of May off of work, and school will also end for me before the 1.0 release, which means starting May 8th, I'm committed to one guide per day, sometimes two, as well as regular full runs and streams. I've got a tentative content schedule in my description. I'm currently working to finish early access guides and get my basic beginner guides up ahead of time. And as a newly partnered channel, I'm offering all this content as early access through channel memberships, as well as on my new Patreon. If you're interested, you can check the link in my description. I will never paywall my content, and it will all come out eventually on this channel. It's simply available early for those of you who wish to support me. Again, thank you all for watching. This has been an incredible early access, and I look forward for Darkest Dungeon 2's full release.